Both the first reading and the Gospel have a lot to do with the exercise of this member of our body, referred to by St. James as a tiny member able to do an awful lot of harm. And that harm can come back to us in the beyond. Do you know that not a single wagging of this instrument will be forgotten? We think little, first of all of bad words, then of unpleasant words, but they're all heard on high. And the Lord uses typically Hebrew language to be very concrete about the consequences. There's a crescendo here, and the last one of all is the fire of Gehenna, a word actually which we have in common with our Arabic friends, because Hebrew and Arabic have the same Semitic roots, and it's the same word that exists in the Quran. The Lord then places before our eyes the standards of God, and I would like to pause for a second on this element of the, what we call in Irish, comeuppance, the fact that we can't get away from the consequences of our moments, ever. It happened this week that I was listening to an Italian hermit that was with me for a week of quietness. And I'm always glad to have her because she's extremely erudite. She's done years and years of theology, and she is balanced, as well as being a person of great prayer. And every time she comes, all I like to do is keep my mouth as shut as possible, because then I learn a lot more. So I tried to put that into practice, and it worked. And one thing that she came out with was this. She recommended to me a certain lady called Elizabeth von Hayen, who would have been a princess actually, and lost her noble husband, but was led in the years of her widowhood to great sanctity. And out of the blue would come unto her souls in need. So it turned out that she had a good confessor, and that's a great blessing for these people. And he had, as I say in Irish, enough cop on to say, write all this down. So under obedience she did. And the results are therefore available. I'll simplify hugely, but go to the point. It turned out that quite exceptionally, she was being asked to help bury ugly souls. Normally that doesn't happen because they're so far down that they're not able to make themselves known. But for our good, she was allowed to have this rather alarming contact. They would come to her. Now this is the interesting bit. If they were coming from the very lowest regions of purgatory, they were at that point actually ugly in form, even monstrous in form. And she explained that in the very, very lowest parts of purgatory, her Italian was this, partecipa all'inferno. It participates in the inferno. There's, as it were, such vicinity that the same things are still a bit at work. And the same fire is at work, and because they've just got there, they've got there with their baggage, still completely impure, unpurified, and through the mercy of God, they're just there and not one step further forevermore. Praise God. He does everything, perhaps through our prayer and sacrifice, victim souls, like her actually, this Elizabeth, to make sure that every chance is given. Sometimes actually in comatose state, we don't see it. So they're there, but they've just landed, and they're full of their instincts still in those first times. Therefore they've got there with their interior, very angry, very ugly. And those reactions initially are still there, and she could see this. But she was given one clear insight, actually, as it were, physically, visually. As she began to make sacrifice for them and pray for them, something happened. They progressively lost their ugly aspect and started to become participating in that beauty which was more and more to be theirs. As you know, there are levels. The major part, where most souls are, is the middle part. But there is then the third part, in which the burning out on the level of the senses, those senses that have offended, because the soul has commanded the body, therefore the soul is suffering. When that work is done, perhaps after years, then there's only the pain of loss. The first is called the pain of sense. Then, in the highest form of purgatory, there's only the pain of loss. Why? There's no more distraction. The soul knows what it's made for, and it can't wait to get there. Just think what actually the other place is. I mean, the real other place, where there is no hope. That's the big difference. Because this nun was explaining after studying her work that even though these souls at the lowest level of purgatory are angry, there's some instinct there, they're actually still not in the same form as the damned. Why? The will of God is there and they have embraced it. Okay, I make a jump. I put this teaching up the other day on YouTube, and out of the blue came this message back from somebody who'd heard it. And I asked his permission if I could quote it, and he said immediately, he apologized for anything imperfect, but I just want to leave this with you because it says it all. I won't add anything, I'll just quote. So here we are. This is straight from the horse's mouth. My father was at sea. He served on board the HMS Queen Mary as a chief steward for the doctor. Dad attended Mass every day and even used to take a tender to go ashore at times in and around the coast of Africa. But that's another story. He was about 21 or 2 when he had contracted severe pneumonia, and that was in the 1950s. He had got so bad, he was taken off the ship in Cape Town and taken to the local hospital. He had left it so long, he was literally burning out, and his temperature had gone off the scale, I think over 103 or more. Anyway, he told me that he remembers being up in the corner of the room, in the hospital, in Seoul. Quote, I still had all my senses. I could see, I could hear, I could smell, and so on. That's why they are anointed. Now, his father has put that comment in because we priests know that if you're called urgently and the person has just died, we are told in formation you can still anoint in the first half hour because the body is still warm and the soul is still around. You actually add mentally the form si vivis or si capax es. And he knew he was going somewhere. Now this is put in capital letters, up and away. He felt no pain, great peace, great joy, and he could see the doctors and nurses standing around the body. Anyway, he said, before I was to pass on to the next, now I provide the word world there, a voice said, I must take one last look at the body in which I was housed. As he looked down, he could see his body, his face, and everything. And he saw the doctors and nurses trying to put back life into it, knowing full well that they didn't have any chance. He could also describe the features of the doctors and the matron, even the time on her watch that she wore at her lapel. He then felt himself being thrust back into his body and woke up in agony and pain, and he said to me, the pain of the living. Anyway, the doctor came and said, we lost you last night, John, for a few minutes. And he said, I know. I saw you trying to bring me back to life. He described all the people in the room and the exact time to the doctor, who was fascinated. Now, the one who's writing this goes on that it happened in St. Damian's ward, and that's how I get the name Damien. And he goes on, there were many miracles in that hospital, and the nuns, notice, used to do 24-hour prayer vigils for patients. Now there's one bit here I want to add because it's actually scientifically interesting. This is the second message he sent me with this to add, giving us permission to use it. The soul, he got this from his father, has all the senses. Dad also said we have sight, but we can't see sight. We hear, but we can see hearing, etc. It was in his spirit he discovered his senses were still all there. Now, do you see what's going on? It's known if a child has been born without eyes and the child dies, immediately after death, it will for the first time see I can see. Why? It's seeing through the soul that is no longer dependent on the physique, the senses. And by the way, other testimonies tell us that the soul perceives far more. And that's why, when we get into the beyond with no distraction, no body, it's either hugely ecstatic or awfully infernal. Because it's direct. The soul is naked, with no protection against reality. Now do you see, my friends, why once we're dead, one sees what mattered and what mattered